This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
You're all very welcome to this meeting. I'm very thankful indeed to Jon Burrows, the head of the Ulster Unionist Party, for coming to visit us. My name is Dahi O'Callig. I'm the chair of the UK group in the Institute, and I'd like to invite Tim Atwood of the John Hume Foundation to introduce our speaker and just to say that this event is jointly organised by the Institute here and the John Hume Foundation. Tim.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks everybody for attending and those online as well. And the John and Pat Hume Foundation, very important is also part of that. The name of the foundation, and rightly so, because she helped deliver the piece along with John and so many other people. First of all, can I thank Dahi and the IIEA for partnering again. We've been in a partnership with IIEA since the start of the foundation, which was just over 5 years ago. We've had a range of people speaking here, including David O'Sullivan, Richard Laughlin, Simon Coveney, David Graham from the DUP backroom team as well. So it's important to have a partnership with a really important organisation, because John was a European at heart, and obviously with the Irish presidency coming up, we hope to do a number of events to recognise that role over the next 6 months. We have, since we found it, had sort of two themes, political themes, around building common ground and also the words of Seamus Mallon, a shared home place. And we wanted to encourage debates and discussions, critical debates and discussions around building common ground, about relationships in the north, south and east, west. And the partnership with IEA has helped us deliver those events in Dublin on a number of occasions, so we're delighted. I know Jon Burrows, as when he was commander of the PSNI, but we actually first met in Iraq, in Kirkuk, at an event organised by somebody who knows academic Pádraig Amala. It was the Forum for Cities in Transition, and that was cities that were in conflict or coming out of conflict, and we were in Kirkuk, a pretty dangerous place. It was before ISIS, post Saddam, and we used to have to travel 2 hours every day to a conference venue, which was pretty difficult. Dahi actually spoke on the panel along with Chris McCabe, Pete Sherlow and Sean Farren, who was the first chair of the foundation, hasn't been well in recent years. And it was a fascinating event. And I remember speaking to one of the delegates at lunchtime, because I wasn't sure they understood what the panel was talking about. And he asked me the question, he says, how long did your peace process last? And he was talking about the negotiations with chaired by George Mitchell. I said 800 years, and he says that gives us some hope in Iraq. So it was very important. So John and I go back some way. We're delighted he's here. We've had Mike Nesbitt last year spoke in St Mary's as Ulster Unionist leader, and it's important to have the engagement in the north, but equally in the south. I know there's an audience here who's ready and willing to listen to your thoughts and views, and you're very welcome. On behalf of IEA and John Pat Hume Foundation, thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dahi and Tim, for that warm welcome. I am honoured to be here. Yes, Tim holds the record in the world for the person who fleeced me for the most expensive pint. We were in the desert at a really strange was it a club of some sort, go-karting venue that had no go-karts going around the circuit. And we walked in, and the first thing they asked us in the door was firearms, just put them in the little cabinet. We says, no, we're not carrying firearms. We're just out for a pint. I said, whose round is it? Tim says, it's yours. And I think it was something like $40 for 2 pints. So he owes me several pints in exchange. The title of my speech is that peace is no longer enough, that now is the time to unlock prosperity and opportunity for everyone in Northern Ireland. And I genuinely believe that is where we are at in Northern Ireland, and that's where our people are at. But could I just, first of all, after I've thanked you for this kind invitation today, to pay tribute to Jon Hume. I would have disagreed, and I grew up listening to Jon Hume as a young man, and as I grew up in life. And many things that Jon Hume wanted constitutionally in terms of his desire for United Ireland, I might passionately disagree with. But I grew up in huge admiration for the SDLP because they believed in one thing that stood them apart from Sinn Féin, and that was a commitment to peace no matter what. That murdering people, maiming people, threatening people, blowing things up was wrong morally. And that is an important thing. And John Hume led with conviction and integrity and vision and courage. And I want to pay absolute tribute to him. What we've achieved in Northern Ireland would not be possible without him, but also not without his wife, who was there supporting him, not without his friends, not without his colleagues. And actually, it was a dangerous thing to be a nationalist politician in Northern Ireland as well, because you not only drew the wrath of loyalists, but you drew the wrath of violent Republicans. And I want to pay tribute to the SDLP for staying firm to their principles of democracy and reconciliation in the darkest days of our troubles. And likewise to David Trimble, who had his own journey and struck a deal which I think tested unionism to its absolute limits. The unionist community was absolutely, fundamentally divided over the Belfast Agreement. You could toss a coin, it was probably 50-50 amongst the unionist community. The thing that most challenged many unionists, and in hindsight, I wish it was actually separate from the Belfast Agreement, I think you would have got a lot more buy-in, was the issue around the early release of prisoners. For many in the unionist community, that was incredibly difficult, as well as the change to policing, which affected my own family as I grew up in a family of service, constabulary. But David Trimble showed remarkable courage in signing that deal and bringing people with him, in sticking with the deal in the difficult years afterwards. And I think John Hume and David Trimble are owed a debt of gratitude by everybody in Northern Ireland, the island of Ireland, and across these islands. I also want to say this. The British and Irish governments deserve great praise. A lot of civic bodies deserve great praise. I don't give any praise to those who stop killing people. I believe that what they did on both sides was wrong. It was horrendous. The calculated murder of our citizens is unforgivable. And I also, as a unionist who wants to reach out and make Northern Ireland work, I do take seriously my role as a unionist leader in standing up to the rewriting of history, because I hear it every day. And it mightn't be as popular a message in some audiences, do pay tribute to the security forces who held the peace on both sides of the border in difficult and dangerous circumstances. And the vast, vast, vast majority did their duty in difficult circumstances with honor. Now, as I move on to my speech, I just want to convey something about my own values. I grew up in a family that was imbued in service to their country. My grandfather fought in the Second World War. And whenever I grew up, I sat on his knee and listened to stories about the war. And I thought this was wonderful. But he told me, and it was the story, and I'll try not to get emotional because we hear remind my grandfather. He talked about his best friend, Hugh Crangles from West Belfast. And three best friends got on a boat and they sailed to France. Burrows, Beck, and Crangles. They were known as the BBC. And Hugh Crangles from West Belfast died a few days into the Normandy landings. My grandfather sat me down, and I remember that I was about 5 years of age. The troubles were raging. And he said to me that Hugh Crangles, a Catholic, died for my freedom. And that it was an anathema to patriotism to be sectarian towards your own countrymen. So as I stand before you as someone who is proud to be a unionist, who is passionate about unionism, who will advocate the case for the United Kingdom, who will stand up for our security forces when they have done no wrong, I will challenge them when they do wrong. I am passionately not just non-sectarian, but anti-sectarian. And I believe everyone in Northern Ireland is equal, should have equal opportunity and equal access to all services. And I will admit, as a unionist leader, in the past, things were not always a level playing field in Northern Ireland. David Trimble said that unionism built a strong house, but it was also a cold house for some. That required courage to say, and I have no difficulty in saying, that unionism got things wrong in the past. But as we look forward, I have this sense in Northern Ireland that we have achieved a real landmark position. Last year, nobody was killed in the security situation in Northern Ireland. Nobody was killed at the hands of loyalist paramilitaries. No one was killed at the hands of dissident Republicans. That was a landmark moment. Parade disputes have all but vanished. Interface violence that used to plague communities is vastly reduced. The levels of rioting you used to see in parts of Derry or Ardoyne are hugely reduced. We have, in terms of the absence of violence, the most peaceful Northern Ireland in 50 years. And the stats show that. Bombings and shootings and rioting and all of those things, they are at the lowest they've been in 50 years. Relationships between Britain and Ireland as islands are at the best they've been in 50 years. Northern Ireland has made huge progress since the Belfast Agreement. Unemployment is down 80%. We have the lowest unemployment in Europe. It's about 2%. I'll come on to economic activity in a second. We are world class in many things like fintech, cybersecurity. Our agri-food industry is outstanding. It feeds about 15% of the population in the UK, despite being 3% of the population of the UK. We are outstanding in advanced manufacturing. We're outstanding in green engine technology mission, a company of my own constituency, Rapebus. We are doing outstandingly well in terms of being a hub for movie making and filmmaking, which Belfast has become. So we have achieved so much, but there is a sense of discontent growing in Northern Ireland that we have not exploited the full opportunities that our peace has provided us. There's disillusionment with Stormont. 8 out of 10 people think it's a basket case. It doesn't seem to be able to address the big, deep issues of our time, which we'll come on to in a second. There's a disconnect. Some of the big issues that we face, nobody's grappling with. Economic inactivity is amongst the highest in Europe. We have a generation of people who are not getting the opportunities to go out and work. There's a sense that Stormont is about them uns and usums, that their only strategy when they can't actually agree a budget is to blame the Brits for not giving them enough money. Their messaging is switching off. So how do we now take the next step forward? How do we move from a Northern Ireland where peace has been achieved to actually where we can have genuine prosperity, good public services, and we can make it work for everybody? And then you can have your constitutional arguments whichever way you want, but in the prism of a first-class Northern Ireland. Now, I'm going to start with some issues of Stormont reform. I'm the only unionist leader, and we're the only unionist party that believes in reforming Stormont. The TUV want to bring it down. The DUP have been resistant to reform. We stand alone, and I stand alone as a unionist leader in saying Stormont needs to change. Talk about how that changes in a second. One of the phrases I used was that Stormont was designed to exist, not excel. For a very good reason. The architects of the Belfast Agreement wanted to get as many people around the government table as possible, have as many protections as possible, have as much I'm not going to use that word. The academics will know what I mean. It's left me, yes. So, but that was never designed to give us the most efficient form of government. It maximized cross-community protections. It maximized absolute inclusion in the executive over the efficient delivery of government. It created a situation where all these years later, big decisions are not made because you have a government really of individual ministers and party members as opposed to collective cabinet responsibility. So the big things that should have been done in Northern Ireland 20 years ago haven't been done. We haven't invested in our infrastructure like water. In Northern Ireland, there's 100 places right now you cannot build a home. The plot is there. The houses could be built, but they can't access NI water. House prices are going up as a result. House rents are going up as a result because of supply and demand. The same things are holding back our business. Nobody wants to grapple with the issue of water infrastructure because nobody wants to put their hand up and say, we believe in water charges. And the minister who holds that portfolio can't say it because her party will take the can. Because there isn't a collective government. There's a series of parties who have individual ministries. What health minister is going to be the person who says, I'm going to close 3 or 4 hospitals, or I'm going to reduce the number of trusts? Because that party will carry the can. Who's the education minister who's going to say, actually, in Northern Ireland, we're far too many schools, and our system doesn't work, and we're going to restructure it, and there's going to be less schools, but they're going to be better quality? Because the party that holds that ministry is going to carry the can and carry the can alone. So when we talk about Stormont, we need to find a way that there is collective ownership by the government of the day in all of those big things. The first thing I would do in Stormont is change the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister to Joint First Minister. That is the first concrete thing. Not only is it a reflection of reality that they are joint offices, but secondly and crucially, their existence as they are polarizes our politics. Every single election, the DUP will knock the doors and say, no matter which unionist party you want to vote for us because we can keep Sinn Féin from being First Minister, or we can regain. Sinn Féin will knock the door and say, you might want to vote for the SDLP or Alliance, but actually vote for Sinn Féin because we're the only people who can either keep the First Minister's role or stop the DUP taking it back. It polarizes our politics. The second thing is we need to look at Stormont in terms of how we actually change what it does and focuses on every day. Non-binding motions dominate us in Stormont. I've been there for 9 months. I've probably spent 20 minutes on legislation and hours on non-binding motions that have no meaningful impact on anybody. The public, if they actually, when you tell them that motion that they've just passed with fanfare at Stormont has all the legal impact and effect of what the local sixth form college has debated at their debating society on a Friday afternoon. Yet we're spending time doing that. Ministers are not scrutinised long enough and deep enough in our committees. There are endless problems in Stormont, and Stormont now needs fixed. And what I call for is that after the next election, all the parties sit round the table and look in the 2-year period after the next election in May 2027 and the general election in 2029, if it goes that far. There's a 2-year window where the parties can discuss reform. Reform that brings more accountability, more efficiency, more scrutiny, and gives the opportunity to have collective cabinet responsibility and a proper opposition. The minute we have the SDLP opposition, they do as good a job as they can do, but they're relatively small. I want to see a Stormont where you have a shadow health minister, shadow finance minister, shadow justice minister, where there is normal, healthy scrutiny and accountability. Now is the time to do it. Traditionally, we have had reforms to Stormont and the Belfast Agreement under the shadow of a guillotine when there's been a crisis, where we're saying we need to get back in by a certain time to get this done. We're going to shut the door and you're not leaving until you get the reforms that you need done. And they've been hasty. And the second thing about those reforms is this. They've been done to please the biggest 2 parties. And often they've cemented the biggest 2 parties' grip on power in Northern Ireland as a reward to get them back into government. Again, that needs to change. And the 2 governments have a responsibility to that when they are presiding over talks in those situations, not to see the short-term solution that gets the big 2 back in power, because they've cemented their hold on politics. So we need to reform Stormont. I passionately am a unionist. And before I talk about how we seek for prosperity, let me just say, and it's important that I outlined to you, I do believe the best place for the people of Northern Ireland is in the United Kingdom. I believe the benefits are practical. They benefit our national security, our economic security, and they benefit our peace. I outlined to you for a few minutes why I believe that. Before outlining to you what I think needs done to really transform Northern Ireland to make it a thriving place for everybody. The first is this, that in Northern Ireland, because of the magic of the Belfast Agreement, you can be British, Irish, or both. The border is invisible. You can carry both passports. You can have all your aspirations. And yet we have a constitutional settlement that is delicate but precise enough that has delivered us peace. I don't think it's the time for constitutional upheaval. I think that is a leap into the dark. That is the case that I will make. I believe that being in the United Kingdom, and I know it's maybe not an argument a lot of people in this room will agree with, allows us access to the national security that the United Kingdom can offer. We are members of NATO. We are members of the G7. We are a nuclear power. We are the fifth or sixth largest military might in the world. It is the Royal Navy that protect the Atlantic and those cables that run from Ireland to America. These are all things that I advocate for whenever I'm talking about the pro-union case. I think it is good to be part of the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world. So I think Northern Ireland being at peace is best served within the United Kingdom. But I equally give the aspiration to anyone to change that. I'm not someone who wants to change it to 55 or 60% for the referendum. People, and we give an option there to say, principled consent, 50 votes plus one. It is not the ideal way to change, but unionism should have confidence to say we will stick by the rules. That you genuinely have an opportunity in Northern Ireland, whilst we want to make it work for everybody and make a compelling case for Northern Ireland to remain in the United Kingdom by giving you the prosperity and opportunity and fair treatment, that you have your aspiration and shot of making the case for United Ireland. And I think we should protect that for the people of Northern Ireland. I've increasingly heard some chatter amongst some in the DUP about it shouldn't be 50%, it should be 55 or 60%. That would be a sign of unionist insecurity and bad faith, in my view, because I believe in fairness. So what is the next chapter for me in Northern Ireland? We need now to build the Northern Ireland for the future that can genuinely thrive, that can deal with economic inactivity, which is the highest in Europe. And how do we do that? And some of this will transcend here in the Republic of Ireland and also across the United Kingdom. The first is, and Tony Blair said one thing I 100% agree with, education, education, education. Early years is something we need to invest in Northern Ireland massively. I see, and I'm the education spokesman for the Ulster Unionist Party, I see an issue in Northern Ireland, which I imagine is happening around the rest of Europe. It certainly is happening here in the Irish Republic and happening in Great Britain. And an increasing level of children with additional needs, delayed educational needs and special education needs. There's a huge spectrum there of different issues. But parents are telling me, and teachers are telling me, that children are changing, that they're behind key milestones like never before. They're turning up in nursery school and primary school behind key milestones. We need a massive investment in Northern Ireland in early years. We need a massive investment in Northern Ireland to help parents deal with one of the defining issues of our time, which is screens, and young people's minds being changed by too much access to screens. We need to promote some really basic principles of more play and more outdoor exercise and better nutrition and less screen time. And that early years is so vital because we're storing up problems that are only being addressed at 13 when they should be addressed at 3. Speech and language problems that are being diagnosed at 9, which could be diagnosed very early on. And I spoke to speech and language specialists earlier. And Northern Ireland has particular problems in all of these areas because where you look at areas where the troubles raged, that's where the biggest issues are in terms of economic disadvantage, educational underattainment, Protestant working class boys, areas where Republican violence was at its height as well. If we want true reconciliation, if we want true prosperity, if we want true opportunity for all, we need a massive investment in early years. Northern Ireland, like everywhere else in the United Kingdom, is struggling with skills. So alongside education, we need skills. We still suffer a brain drain in Northern Ireland. We have pupils who want to go to university in Queen's or Jordanstown who go to university in England, Scotland, Wales. Why? Because our tuition fee model is flawed. It is more lucrative to have students from England go to Queen's than it is students from Northern Ireland. In that they often never come back. We don't have a Royal Agricultural College in Northern Ireland. Sorry, Royal Veterinary College. And yet we're responsible for 15% of the UK food. And veterinary surgeons are at every aspect of the food chain. And we've got a huge number of domestic pets, as everywhere else. Every single person in Northern Ireland, Catholic or Protestant, who wants to become a vet has to go to England or Dublin, and it's very hard to get into Dublin. That is a scandal, that we're losing our talent. That skills pipeline is something we need to grip. The apprenticeship system doesn't work for us in Northern Ireland. The industries aren't lined up with the schools. Every business I go into who's already facing challenges around national insurance contributions, minimum wage, they're facing changes now with some union regulation coming up. They tell me they have the order book, but they don't have the people. They don't have the skills. These are things that we need to address. We need to offer every single person in Northern Ireland that opportunity from the very early stages of their life, right through to they get to the point of deciding their career destination, the opportunity and the skills, and currently we don't do it. So education, skills. But there are very many other things that we need to transform for our economy. Northern Ireland is currently being held back by the tax differential between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. If you're a hotel and you're in hospitality or tourism in Northern Ireland, you're facing VAT at 20%. In the Republic of Ireland, it's going down to 9%. It's already much lower than it is in Northern Ireland. Our industry cannot cope with that. It is an unlevel playing field. So I'm calling for the government to allow Northern Ireland to be a pilot for a reduction in VAT on hospitality and tourism. For us to pilot that for the United Kingdom, to go back and say in 5 years' time, how much did that actually cost? How many jobs did it actually create? To have that reduction in the corporation tax that will make us as competitive with the Republic of Ireland, but lift prosperity across the island of Ireland. With all of the concern about the Windsor framework and all of that, what a lovely counterweight to that would be, that we actually had those big levers available to us to make Northern Ireland thrive. Because true reconciliation has been not just the absence of violence, which we've largely achieved and we can never be complacent about, but is now developing in Northern Ireland, where you can have your aspiration to be British, Irish, or both, where you can travel across the island of Ireland where there's no visible border, where you can carry a passport of either colour or both. But in that Northern Ireland, where you have the opportunity to strive for your constitutional change peacefully, that it is home for everybody, that it has first-class public services, that has first class in terms of its opportunities for education, first class in terms of its opportunities for jobs, that if you want to call it home and stay at home, you have the opportunity to do that. These are the challenges we need to generate the genuine prosperity for the people of Northern Ireland. It is a massive opportunity for us. And I want to position the Ulster Unionist Party as the party now that is saying, we have achieved our peace, which we must hold on to, that is precious, but that now our focus must be pivoting to achieving prosperity for our people. And that requires the changes at Stormont. It requires the changes of our governance. It means a new way of delivering politics. I said downstairs, and I'll repeat it here. Whenever I'm going to call for the changes to the to Stormont, and I do want the parties to sit down after the next election, I will say, and please don't take it in an abrasive way, I think it should be led by the parties of Northern Ireland. I think we should be, and I've been saying, it's a strand one issue and leave it to us. Yes, the governments have a watching brief. As the only unionist leader who believes in reform of Stormont, the more involvement there is of the Irish government, the less able I am to deliver it. Because the Democratic Unionist Party are saying this is about meddling in Northern Ireland's affairs. The TUV and Democratic Unionist Party will say this is about weakening the union. This is the next stage to United Ireland. So I need, whenever I say this is a matter for the parties and not for the Irish government, it is for that reason. It's not trying to be rude or obnoxious or shut the door on the people and the government of the South. But it's the real politic that if I can deliver this and we can get people to buy into it, it needs not to be seen as a threat. And I need to be seen as a strong unionist leader to deliver it. And it's not about being two-faced and saying one thing and doing another. I need to convince the unionist people that I'm someone they can trust with the union, that I'm someone who will passionately, wherever I go, make the case for the union, that is proud of our history, that is proud of our role that we have played in the world, that believes that the United Kingdom is a great place, that believes that it is worthwhile being in the fifth or sixth largest military power in the world. That is important in these uncertain times, more important than ever when there's geopolitical insecurity. That we have the protection of our MI5 and our MI6 and our GCHQ, that we have access to police mutual aid. That means if we have trouble, we can bring police forces from across the United Kingdom into Northern Ireland at the drop of a hat. I advocate these things, proud to be a unionist, passionate about the benefits of being in the union, passionate about the fact that I think we're economically better in the United Kingdom, but with really good cooperation with the Republic of Ireland. Because not only do I believe that, but only can I bring unionist people with me in doing the reforms necessary if they know I have their back. That when canvassers are knocking the door in Mid-Ulster and Fermanagh and our heartlands, they know that when Jon Burrows says, I'll always uphold the union, that I will. That I can be generous because they know I'm strong and secure. And there's a sweet spot in what I'm trying to offer the people of Northern Ireland to say that I'm the unionist leader that believes Stormont should remain and should never be collapsed, but should change. That the Good Friday Agreement was a wonderful thing, but now it's time to evolve it. That it is time for reform. But let's make sure the Irish government are taking a watching brief and not being seen to steer it. The unionist leader that will talk up the benefits of the union, but I don't need to poke nationalism in the eye. I don't need to be disrespectful to my neighbour. I don't need to have any ideological opposition to having cooperation with the Irish Republic on any number of things that benefit the people of Northern Ireland. That I can be a passionate unionist, but also passionately anti-sectarian. That I will call out every wrongdoing, every sectarian act, every racist act, every homophobic act with passion and conviction. Not worry about what some community might say, well, they're not going to like that. Whenever there was an effigy of immigrants put on the top of a bonfire in Moygashel, I called it out loud and clear. It was wrong. I stood in Derry when the Bloody Sunday report was read out. The 3 police officers, me, and there was thousands of people in Derry. David Cameron stood up and I listened, and I first knew that the report went the right way whenever the hands came out of the Guildhall and the thumbs went up. And I felt a weight change in that city. And David Cameron said, what happened on Bloody Sunday was unjustifiable, unjustified and unjustifiable. I'm able to say that as a unionist leader. What I'm trying to convey is principled, passionate unionism can be as strongly anti-sectarian, call out wrongdoing when it happens, even when it's the state. They can say to our neighbours, we got things wrong in the past. They can call out racism wherever it comes, call out large paramilitaries whenever they do wrong. That is always on the side of integrity and doing the right thing and being principled. Can also then provide the passionate leadership that can return the Ulster Unionist Party to the pinnacle of political leadership of unionism. Because I believe if the Ulster Unionist Party can rise up again and lead unionism, it'll actually help lead a better Northern Ireland. I do wish and yearn for the SDLP to rise up as well, and I wish them well in that endeavour. I do believe that both those brave, historic, proud parties, the SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party, when they made that peace accord, in many ways, electorally, it was an act of self-harm. But they did it for the people of Northern Ireland. Their vote declined ever since. Others stole their clothes. Others became more relevant. Others were chased by the government, grabbed their attention. I don't think the government stood up enough for the Ulster Unionist Party when we struck that deal. It should have been stronger on Sinn Féin when they refused to decommission, when they were still kneecapping people, when they were stealing literally the biggest bank robbery in Europe. And the failure to do so eroded the authority of David Trimble, who put his neck in the line, who said, there and no further. That's as far as I can bring my community. And I've stretched them to the limit. And every time that there was an acceptable level of violence conveyed by the government, that there was a blind eye turned, it actually damaged David Trimble, damaged the Ulster Unionist Party. Actually, by extension, damaged the SDLP. So as I draw to a close, I just want to say some things in summary. Northern Ireland stands at an inflection point. We are our most peaceful that we've ever been. That is remarkable. That is precious. We should protect it, not take it for granted. The architects that brought us that peace have suffered. The SDLP and the Ulster Unionist Party are undwarfed compared to where they used to be. We have allowed Sinn Féin and the DUP to grow to become the dominant parties of Northern Ireland. And we've allowed the Belfast Agreement, where it has been renegotiated in parts, to almost exclusively work better for the largest two parties. But yet, there is a moment of massive opportunity. Because there is this discontentment. There is 8 to 9 out of 10 people, according to polls, don't think Stormont delivers for them. And I believe now is the time to stand up and say the next phase is to deliver the real prosperity, is to fix our public services, is to reform Stormont. And if we do that, that will have a natural reconciliation in Northern Ireland. As we start talking about ordinary politics, access to childcare, cost of living, education, skills, fixing our health service. As we start dealing with those issues, I do believe reconciliation will take its next phase too. Genuinely believe we can make Northern Ireland work for everybody. I think it's a great place, great people, and with a great future. I want the Ulster Unionist Party to lead that for unionism. I do wish the SDLP well, and I want to say I want them to flourish again. I think it is necessary and needed. And I want those people who've been switched off from politics since the Belfast Agreement, who came out and voted for it and have never voted since, to hear something different, something new. And I believe it is now time for the next step. And what a legacy it would be for us to put back in to David Trimble and John Hume. That great project, and John Hume, I think, was really the architect of it going way back. It has delivered its peace. Now let us deliver its prosperity. Let's deliver its opportunity. Let's make Northern Ireland world class. Let's make it best in class. Let's make it a place for everyone. And then within that, if you want your United Ireland, you make the case. I'll make the case passionately for United Kingdom. But what I really want is a Northern Ireland that works for everyone. It's the best place to live, to work, to socialise, to raise a family, to start a business. The most compassionate and caring place to get old, to get ill, to have the very best end of life care. And that's what I'm going to focus on in the next years ahead. It's been a real privilege to speak to you. Thank you for your invite. I'll take any of your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, John, for a very thought-provoking speech and in great detail. So we're open to questions. Who would like to ask questions? Sean, would you, if you don't mind saying who you are and if you have any affiliation?
Well, thank you very much, John, for that really constructive and positive presentation. Sean Haughey, individual member of the Institute of International European Affairs. Just two questions. Number one, in relation to the reform of Stormont. What do you think the chances are of achieving the reform of Stormont? I note that Sinn Féin have published their proposals this week in relation to the reform of Stormont. And I wonder what you think of them if you had a chance to look at them. And also in relation to the point you make in relation to the two governments, do you not think that experience tells us that unless the two governments actively engage with Northern Ireland, that the parties don't really get down to business? I'd be interested to see what you might think of that. It's just when the two governments give it their attention, things seem to happen. And secondly, just in relation to the Taoiseach's Shared Island Initiative and indeed the Shared Island Dialogue, do you think that initiative, how do you see that initiative? Do you think it is an initiative to improve community relations within Northern Ireland, or do you see it as a sinister plot by the Republic to bring about a united Ireland? I'd just be interested in what your view is in relation to the Shared Island Initiative. Thank you.
Three questions there. Still digesting Sinn Féin's proposals. I think there's some merit in all of the parties who have published proposals so far, the SDLP Alliance and Sinn Féin. We're digesting them all. I'm giving evidence in Westminster in 2 weeks' time on our position on reform. So I'll give a more considered view then. But I do think it is good that virtually all the parties now except the DUP who are in government want reform. See, in relation to the two governments, I just think there's an issue of optics here. There's two things. First of all, yes, the previous negotiations were done under the shadow of a guillotining crisis, deadline, lock the door, you're not getting out until we get this sorted. So yes, we do them outside of that, hopefully after the next election. Of course, the two governments have a role. I just think we need to be very careful around how we position that role, so we don't spook the unionist community. And we don't give the argument for those who are opposed to reform a platform. Now, I've already heard the argument from the DUP. Any reform will be to unionism's disadvantage. It is a bit of that zero-sum game. That's why the language I use about reform isn't on institutional reform or major renegotiation of the Belfast Agreement. It's actually an operational reform of Stormont. It's about saying, actually, this is about making Stormont more efficient and effective. And I think we need to put those parameters around it, that this is actually about bringing Stormont up to speed in terms of how it operates. And I've called it operational reform, because I think that takes a little bit of the fear from the phrase institutional reform or reform of our institutions. So the governments have a role. I think how we do the optics of that is really important. For unionism, it isn't really an issue for nationalism in the two governments. Because if you're a nationalist, the two governments is a good phrase. There's an element of jointness about that. If you're a unionist, it bristles. Well, hang on, this is Stormont. What do you mean the two governments? Yeah. Even the phrase the two governments, you see, our government and the government of the Irish Republic. That's not me, by the way, I'm simply saying the unionist community will say, these little things matter. And that's why in my language, I have to tread a very careful line in saying, I'll have your back in those. And I just think we need to be careful. There was a third question there.
Third Island.
Look, I have no ideological opposition to anything that brings prosperity to the people of Northern Ireland. It always should be done carefully and make sure that it has confidence and it has no, hidden political agenda. But if it brings money and prosperity into Northern Ireland, I broadly support.
Thank you. John Fitzgerald.
John Fitzgerald, economist, Trinity College. Britain is moving closer to Europe, and it may be some time before Britain rejoins. Do you think that this will be helpful in making Northern Ireland less of an exception within the United Kingdom and better relations between the British government and the EU and Ireland generally?
Yes, this European thing is a very complex beast. Because our party would have been a mix of people who would be Brexit and Remain if you asked the membership. And I think if you had asked the membership, then unionism, it was mostly Brexit, okay, leave. Then Ulster Unionism, it was probably very 50-50. But the party took a strategic decision that regardless of the merits of Brexit or Remain, for the people of Northern Ireland, Brexit was going to be a disaster. Because there was going to have to be a border somewhere, and our guess was it would be in the Irish Sea and not where the border is now. Why I say that, before I answer your question, is my view on the United Kingdom and our position in Europe is that whatever happens in the United Kingdom, we should do those big issues as Northern Ireland being the same as the rest of the United Kingdom. So if the United Kingdom moving closer to Europe removes the internal barrier between East and West, that is a positive thing. So the key for me is we do it all together. You can't have an Irish Sea border. You cannot have a trade border within a sovereign country. That is, now, we said that would happen. We were right. Those complain most about the Irish Sea border are those who propose Brexit. So yes, in short, anything that removes that friction East and West, while also deals with the issue North and South. And look, part of me is I think that Brexit wasn't good for the United Kingdom, wasn't good for the island of Ireland, wasn't good for Northern Ireland, wasn't good for any of us. I understand why people voted Brexit. Leave. I understand why there was a sense of Euroscepticism about the institution. I think it maybe could have been more magnanimous to David Cameron when he went over and spoke to them. But the reality is, Northern Ireland was never going to leave the same way as the rest of the United Kingdom. Short answer is yes, it would be positive.
Thanks, Paul, and then
Paul Gillespie and the new CD. What do you say to people who argue that the UK can't deliver on these benefits that you outline as a unionist because it's dysfunctional in political, economic, even constitutional terms increasingly, whereas the Republic of Ireland and the EU can deliver on the benefits you want?
Yeah, well, I would reply like this. I think there is a narrative sometimes that talks the UK down, talks the Irish Republic up. Okay? And I say that, by the way, I have family who live here. I holiday in Donegal every year. I'm in Dublin once a month because of family here. My nieces are Irish, so I have no ideological opposition to any of this stuff. Look, the United Kingdom still is an extremely powerful nation. It is still the fifth or sixth largest military might in the world. It still has a continual sea nuclear deterrent. It still has some of the finest intelligence services in the world. There was a recent documentary came out last year, I think it was Dara McIntyre, and it showed that organised crime gangs are bringing drugs into Europe via Ireland. And on the radio, the criminals are saying, stay in Irish water, don't stray into British water. The British have boats, the Irish have radios. Now, I think Ireland is beginning to recognise that it needs to address national security. This is a changing and dangerous world. So whatever that narrative, and you've posed me a very legitimate question, I would push back to say, well, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, founder member of NATO. We are a significant military power. A lot of people don't like to talk about that, but this is an uncertain world. I think that brings security. Economic security, we are still the ability to change our own interest rates, which the rest of the European Union doesn't have. Fifth or sixth largest country in the world, member of the G7, all of these other things, founder member of all sorts of economic institutions. I say this not to poke anyone in the eye, but we give a rescue loan, as I understand, after the credit crunch, was 3.25 billion to the Irish Republic. There is a depth to the UK economy that is a sense of security. I do argue that Northern Ireland, by the way, I'll come back to that in 1 second. So whilst there are challenges in the UK around their politics at the minute, it's still a formidable country. It's still a rich country. It's still a powerful country. And I think our security is better off within it.
Thank you, John. Given the time, I'm only able to take 2 more. So firstly, Prentice de Rossa, and secondly, Francis Rowan.
Thanks, and thank you very much. Prentice de Rossa, the member of the IIEA and a number of other organisations. 2 questions. The shared island is silent on the question of a united Ireland, which in my view is a good idea. I'm not saying the United Ireland is a good idea, but that the shared Ireland is silent on it is a good idea, and it should not be pushed into a framework of seeking a United Ireland, in my view. Could I suggest that perhaps one way of addressing that would be for the Assembly to establish a similar kind of an initiative looking at the idea of a shared island, which would not, again, look at the constitutional question, but how the 2 parts of this island can cooperate to the benefit of both parts of the island. And secondly, the question of, no, I leave it at that.
Thanks, Prentice.
Look, I wouldn't give Stormont any extra responsibilities until it reforms. Sometimes I say I don't trust it to run a bath. It is extremely dysfunctional at times. And I think what we should be doing is focusing on in principle, I have nothing to stop looking at things that would, bring more prosperity and, yeah.
Yes, formal setup. Type of shared island.
Yeah. Look, I don't make these big policy decisions on the hoof. So, you've asked me a question. I would go and think about it and weigh it up. Because I'll see a headline tomorrow in the Irish Times, and I'll then say to the rest of my party, and they'll say, "What is this you've committed to?" And I'll say, "I'm not really sure." But I was asked for a straight answer. So look, I can't answer the question because I would need to know more detail to think about it.
That's fair enough, John. Francis?
Francis Rowan, a member of the Institute and the Civil Service Board of Northern Ireland. I was very struck by your point about there being a 2-year window after the next election. And I'm just wondering what thoughts you have about what should be done in the meantime to prepare for that window. What's the nature of public debate that could move people on from seeing a zero-sum gain out of any reform? And I take your point on that. What could be done in the meantime? And then connected with that, how do you see the reform of Stormont linking in with the reform of the Northern Ireland civil service and public service itself, which obviously underpins the delivery people get at the front line is not directly from the members of the Assembly, it's from the system that they drive, of course. But I was just wondering, have you had any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I have. I think we're getting into electoral season and formation of manifestos. And we've managed to get this issue of reform onto the agenda in the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee. So all the party leaders have been called to there to give evidence. I'm giving evidence in 2 weeks' time. So I think that starts putting it in the agenda. We're starting to publish each other's policy papers. And the third thing is it can be a point of discussion as we run up to the election, as we position our case on reform. So I think that's how we get it out there and get people thinking about it between now and then. When it comes to the window, I think after the election, I think we really need to have an incentive for the parties to do this. So rather than the normal stick deadlines, I think that where the two governments could say, here's the reward if you get this done. Like they cut the corporation tax, like they cut the hospitality and VAT as a pilot, like some investment in something. Perhaps the Irish government could part fund a veterinary college for Northern Ireland. Now, in terms of Northern Ireland civil service reform, you're absolutely right. Northern Ireland civil service, and it's not a dig at the hard-working frontline members of it, but it is a terrible state. It needs a massive reform. It begins with accountability at the top. So I recently submitted an assembly question saying, who is the head of the civil service accountable to? Nobody. If the civil service is failing, can the head of the civil service be subject to any form of performance management? No. And this is somebody who earns £250,000. That culture of lack of accountability pervades right the way through the Northern Ireland civil service. Layer after layer after layer. I asked a question recently because the Northern Ireland Audit Office said the performance of the Northern Ireland civil service was appalling. Absolutely appalling. And I asked how many civil servants in Northern Ireland in the last 2 years have been held to account or had their performance addressed. Any issue of unsatisfactory performance. The answer came back, I think it was 14 over 2 years. That's 7 per year, and there's 18,000 civil servants. I see it in committee all the time, where actually a committee, and I'm in the Public Accounts Committee, can ask for a report and they literally won't get it. 3 months later, it's still not there. 6 months later, we still haven't got. We chased the was it the finance head of the finance department off the committee recently for that. So the Northern Ireland civil service needs a massive change of culture, of leadership, of accountability. And I think it needs in itself a body set up to bring in those reforms. And I think it is holding Stormont back. I think it's holding the delivery of public services back. One thing I've picked up in the Northern Ireland civil service is a terrible culture of risk aversion. Nobody wants to make a decision, and decisions aren't made because there's a feeling that if you get something wrong, you're going to have it's going to come down from on top. There's the language that the civil service use is often baffles me. I ask a question, and by the time I hear the answer, I'm literally no wiser. I mean, I said to one of them recently, I like to think I'm, intelligent enough person. I said, I can't understand the word salad you've used about strategic drivers and pillars and levers, and we're leveraging this and that and this. I said, I asked you just a question, was this done or not? So the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and by the way, it's funded at there's about 1.86 civil service in Northern Ireland compared to Great Britain, and yet it underdelivers. So to come back to your question, I think it needs a fundamental reform. It's got to be in our manifesto, led by a team that goes in and does a deep dive into culture, accountability, performance, and leadership. And then gets right back actually to training civil servants to give accurate answers to questions, plain speaking, that has accountability at every stage. And I think that needs a massive form work. So it should be like they did with the police service. I mean, they brought in a commission and they looked at it and they came back with a proposal, blueprint, that was very successful. Some of it were hurtful for people, that the name the RUC changing, which my family found very hurtful. But it's not that difficult to do. And someone should be able to pull together a short commission to come back and fix the Northern Civil Service. So there's my answer. I think it's vital. And leadership, accountability are two of and culture are the big issues in that civil service.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to thank Tim Atwood of the Jon and Pat Hume Foundation for being part of this. And secondly, I want to thank you for coming down and for giving us a very, very thoughtful hour. I think we'll all take it home and think about what you've had to say to us. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.